Friends and enemies, welcome back to the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. The Tuesday interview rip. I'm here tonight with David St-Onge. He's being described to me as a legend in the Quebec Bitcoin scene. He's laughing in the green room there. I think he might be. I mean, even before I knew who David was, when we were just starting the podcast and I was just kind of getting into the Bitcoin community here in Canada, I mean, everyone has seen videos of this guy doling out failed currencies at conferences. Some people think it's a gimmick. I think it's foreshadowing, and we're going to talk about what Dave thinks about all this. But first, as always, the sponsors, EasyDNS. Man, the friendly neighborhood registrar that you need in your life for your website, your company, your business, whatever, your hobby. Maybe you want to start a blog, start a place where you can sell pictures of your feet, whatever. Start a website for a podcast. Anything you want, Mark and the team will help you. They have a great set of standards over there. Not only will they make sure that you get everything up and running, no sweat, no hassle, no problems, but if you don't like what they give you for whatever reason in terms of service, get your money back, guaranteed. He's not going to ask you for you to fill out a survey. Why don't you like the service we gave you? He doesn't care. Okay. He knows that you're going to like what you get from him. And so he's confident in the business that he's running. They have tons of stuff going on over there. First, domain sure. Secure your domain. How many times do you get emails from people or entities pretending to be something that you've signed up for in the past? I had a Coinbase account that I used to use a lot when I first started in Bitcoin because it was the only place we could buy here in Canada. And still to this day, I get spoofed Coinbase emails asking me to update my password and log in. It happens like once every 2 or 3 months. And Mark will make sure it doesn't happen. He'll also protect you from something called typo squatting. So if you're a bull Bitcoin and you own bullbitcoin.com, maybe you also want to buy bullbitcoin.co so that people who go there don't wind up sending their information to a scammer or a fraudulent service and, losing their Bitcoin, whatever, right? All these things are possible with EasyDNS. On top of that, tons of stuff for the Bitcoin enthusiast. Virtual private servers let you do Nostr relays, Bitcoin nodes, BTC Pay servers. We've talked about nodeless before. You can do that as well. Tons of options there. CBP Media is the code. Head to the website or just tell Mark we sent you. He's in the chat sometimes. He's on Twitter all the time under Stump Pope. 50% off your initial round of buys with the code. You can't beat it. Second sponsor, Bull Bitcoin. Dave is wearing a Bull Bitcoin hat. I am not wearing a hat tonight because I got a haircut finally last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. But Bull Bitcoin, hat or no hat, best Bitcoin exchange in the world, led by the best team of Bitcoiners in the world. There is no second best in the asset class, and there is no second best when it comes to exchanges. I'll tell you why. They have everything you need to buy Bitcoin non-custodially. It is safe. It's secure. It comes with baked-in privacy measures like CoinJoin when they do their outputs and their sends. Fantastic. Very low spread. On top of that, non-custodial, as I mentioned. Never worry about Francis and the boys rugging you. Can you imagine having to worry about that? Not me. Couldn't be me, as they say. On top of that, if you want to live on a Bitcoin standard, Bills lets you do it. You can pay your mortgage, your credit card bill. Can you pay the bar tab you walked out on because you had a trillion beers? I don't know. Probably not. But if you want to pay like your university tuition, you can. All these things are possible with Bull Bitcoin and the Bills platform. Can't beat it. Of course, if you sign up with our promo code, somehow you still don't have an account, use our promo code, sign up, $21 added to your account. It's fantastic, man. We can see that you guys are buying. They can see that you guys are buying. It helps support the show, of course, in a small way. But really what we want is for you guys to be using the best platform that we use. Len and I used to buy our Bitcoin. And that's, what we're all about. Third sponsor, Decentral Technologies. These guys are fantastic. They are the mining aficionados here in Canada, the best in class. Sensing a theme here with the sponsors. Place to get your S9 repaired, S19 repaired, S21 repaired. You want to buy a miner? Go for it. Something to put in your garage. You want to stack and rack, something that makes enough noise that your neighbors call the police. They got that for you. If you want to buy something that makes no noise that your wife might not even notice, they got that. Brings me to the BitAxe, CBP branded. If you haven't gotten one yet, you ought to. Why would you not? They're like $250 plus shipping, whatever cooling you want at that price. Solid way to get into the mining game. And one of the reasons we really like them is because not only are they Canadian, not only are they dedicated to the mission, but they understand that decentralizing the mining is maybe the most important thing for the network in the not too distant future. A lot of industrial miners. Yeah, you can buy the equities, you can buy the miner ETFs, but you want to be in a position as a Bitcoiner where you are not relying on these huge corporations that are in my opinion, easily influenced in terms of censorship and other things that are detrimental to the network. So go over there. There's no promo code. Tell them we sent you if they ask, and get started with your mining today. There's no reason to wait. Okay, with no further ado here, Mr. St-Onge is in the chat. He's coming to us from parts unknown. I was saying to him before the show that I dig the vibe in his office. Mine is like my wife calls this the doctor's office because there's like big studio lights here. That's like much more of a warm vibe. And although I don't think you're going to be so warm to government policy tonight, at least we can start on a positive note. What's going on, buddy? Welcome to the show. First time.
Thank you, Joey. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely, man. So tell people if they somehow, Dave, don't know who you are, what you're about. Give me the brief intro here, and then we got a lot to talk about tonight, buddy.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of people that go to conference know me as the guy who give out those bills on at every conference I go. So I'm the one who give out to people saying like free money, and I actually gave some in Quebec City at a not a Bitcoin conference, at ACFest, in like a computer security event in Quebec City, full of geeks and programmers and security guys, and they were really happy to receive free money, and I was able to pack the room at the Bitcoin village there to talk about inflation and hyperinflation, because I was giving out those bills. So it's really a great marketing thing to interest people to the subject. And so basically, I'm the author of the Bitcoin Everything to Know book. I wrote it in French first in 2021, and we got it translated in 2023. So now my fellow Canadians can read it. It's a great book for your parents or for anyone who want. If you're tired of answering those questions of always answer the same question from your families and friends, just buy them my book for the Christmas, and it's gonna answer all their questions.
Before I forget, because I mentioned the book in the video description, but I was going to tell people to go to Amazon to get it. Is that the best place to get it, or is there a better place to get it?
Yeah, it's basically the best place, because there you can get free shipping. That's the thing, because like shipping books cost somewhere like to from $8 to $10 or something like that. I think it's pretty expensive when it's like $25 or $30 books. And you know what? Yesterday it was really on sale on Amazon. I don't know. I don't know why. I'm just going to look that up right now.
Amazon putting things on sale without telling.
Yeah, it is.
Telling you.
It is on sale, $20 instead of 30. So go on Amazon Canada and order it for $20. It's 35% deal right now. It's a coincidence. Amazon doesn't tell us when they do that. So it's so cool. So it's your chance to get it for cheap for all your family for Christmas.
Yeah. That's a no-brainer. I'm gonna buy one after the show. I love supporting the Canadian guys, and I like I said, even before I kind of knew you, I've been a fan of the money thing for a long time. I think it's good guerrilla marketing. Now we should talk about why you do it. Okay, you are the not to use the term that is being thrown around for Kamala next door, but you might be the hyperinflation czar, David. Okay. Cool. Everyone is familiar with this idea that the currency is dying. Debasement is accelerating. We have historical examples of hyperinflation, most frequently discussed, probably Weimar, though there are others. You mentioned Zimbabwe a number of times in recent presentations and stuff that you've written. Tell me about, maybe let's start from square one here. What is inflation and what is hyperinflation, and what is the road between the two?
Yeah, that's a subject. It's really difficult to talk about, because everyone who knows the subjects learned it from different schools, and they use different words, different terms for different definition. So if you talk to a mainstream economist and you say that I don't know, like inflation is linked to the monetary mass, they will say no, it's not linked at all. Look, we printed tons of money in 2008, and there was no inflation in the 2010s, like no inflation at all. So it's a proof that inflation is not linked to monetary mass, and it kind of makes sense for people who didn't dig that subject. They're like, yeah, true. I remember in 2008 they printed a lot of money, and there was no inflation in the 2010s. But when you dig in the subject, you just understand that when we talk about the monetary mass that cause inflation, you need the money to reach the economy. That's basically it. It's they can print as much money they want if it stays on private banks, retail banks balance sheet. Well, the money is not reaching the economy. It will not cause inflation. That's just what happened in 2010s. That's it. And now we got 2020s, the COVID and all that, and boom, all that money that was saved, that was on the balance sheets of banks, got into the economy, and we see what it does now. So when you talk about that with credit money, the credit money theory, like people who believe that money originate from credit, and that the government should print enough, like MMT guys, the modern monetary theory. They're like, yeah, no, printing money doesn't cause any inflation at all. It's impossible. And when you dig the subject, you just understand that it's just a matter of what the money is used for. So if it goes to the stock market, it won't cause inflation because stock market is not included in the CPI. And if it goes in the housing market, it will not cause inflation not because price are not going to go higher, just because housing is not included in the calculation of CPI. So it does cause inflation. It costs more to live. Okay, the rents are going up, the mortgage are going up, but they don't calculate that in CPI. So they're like, no, well, I mean, inflation is like just 5%, but they don't calculate how rent went up and how your mortgage went up. So that basically, it's like a trick. There's three fold there. There's the CPI trick, so they don't calculate all that. The money stays in the bank, can stay in banks balance sheet, and if the money goes to the housing market, well, it's not calculated, and the stock market as well. So that's basically why you can print money and not have CPI inflation, because we don't calculate everything, and money go to some markets that won't inflate retail prices.
This is part of the reason I think, we've talked about this on the show, and I am sure that you've given this a lot of thought. The actual sort of shelter component in CPI is rents. It's not the price of housing, right? And price of housing is important because as currency fails, it's a continuum. It's not, a single moment in time when a currency fails. As the currency fails along this continuum, there is a moment where other assets are monetized. And we've seen this. Yeah, we've seen this in the stock market, as you mentioned. I think nowadays you wouldn't get any raised eyebrows in a room full of Keynesians if you said that Apple stock is a better use of idle money than cash, right? That's one way things have been monetized. And here in Canada, you wouldn't raise any eyebrows if you said to somebody that buying real estate was a better way of parking money than idle cash. And what a lot of people here, maybe the uneducated, I don't want to say uneducated, but maybe the uninformed crowd, right? The university educated crowd, let's say, what they will say is, yeah, those are quote unquote productive assets in a way. And this is a sort of a natural way to invest and grow wealth. The Bitcoiner would say, what we have here is a failure of money to serve its key purpose, which is preserving purchasing power into the future. Right. And so what happened in what happened exactly in some of these examples that you've cited, and you've done a great job with this. I will add some of the articles that you sent me to the show notes before I post the podcast. But in some of these examples you've talked about, what happened that these countries just simply could not control the outcome? There was a stock market during Weimar Germany's hyperinflation event. Zimbabwe, different story for a number of reasons. Maybe we can start with Weimar. Where were the failures of the government? Was there anything the government could have done differently to prevent this, apart from obviously, major policy decisions along the way? But, in your view, What was the big difference between then and now? And are there any similarities, Dave? I'm almost afraid to ask.
Yeah. There's similarities, but there's also key differences here. So what happened with Weimar and any hyperinflation I've read about, and I have bills from 40 hyperinflation out of 52 in my collection right there. So
40
uh,
countries?
yeah, 40 countries out of
Oh
52.
my
But no,
God.
sorry, 58 now, or 57, sorry. It's 57 including Venezuela now since 2016. So yeah, so I'm 16 left to find on eBay. And I've not just collecting bills, I've studied it on
I
reading
got.
books.
Let me ask you
Yeah,
something.
yeah, go ahead.
I have this weird. This is off the beaten path a little bit. Behind me here, there's like 8 footballs. Okay, I started playing quarterback last year for my beer league team, so I've been buying a lot of footballs. My wife gives me a weird look when another football shows up at the house. I can't imagine the looks you must get from people when you order yet another bundle, another skid of failed currency.
Yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows. I work from home and I receive the mail and I put it in the right there, and my
Smart,
wife doesn't know about that.
smart.
That's how.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always bring it to Bitcoin conference. So it's people that are interested by that. So that's fine. But
Keep
I
going.
don't. Well, with my normies friend, I don't open it in dinner for sure.
Yeah.
They won't be interested. So back to the to Weimar. Yeah. So basically, what happened there, and it's exactly the same thing for every hyperinflation. You need to finance the whole government with money printing. So we in our modern society we do print money like to finance the government, like the liberals here in Canada are doing it, but they're not financing the whole government with money printing. So in Weimar, that's what happened. The money was depreciating so fast that um, when you were collecting the taxes, the money would not worth zero. So let's say at the end of the year, you owe 1,000 mark to the Weimar government. Well, at the end of that year, 1,000 mark may be worth like 1 mark or half a mark
Right.
or 20 pfennig. It's cents in Germany. So that's why. So didn't have any revenue from the real economy. So they had to print. So they were printing exact the same thing in Zimbabwe. So the whole government financing was from money printing. So that's one key to have hyperinflation. It's just that they're just financing the whole thing with the money printers, and you're asking yourself, so what could prevent what's preventing hyperinflation right here, right now, or in the United States, because they
Right.
have a big deficit there. I mean, their debt is like 35 trillion, something like
It's
that.
yesterday it made it to $35.6 trillion.
35.6.
Yeah.
And deficit is like what, something like a few trillions deficit.
It's enormous. Yeah.
Yeah.
The numbers are just getting bigger. That
Yeah.
clock is working overtime, buddy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But they finance themselves. They still finance themselves with some taxes that they collect in the real economy. So we're not in hyperinflation territories yet. So what really happened when you get to hyperinflation is that you mentioned that a bit earlier. That's that people stop to use money. They use anything else as money. So in Zimbabwe, they were using cars. They were buying cars and buy it for, I don't know, $6,000, and they were selling it back 5 years later. Well, not 5 years, sorry, a year later for $30,000. So the price of cars would keep go up because
That
of
sounds
inflation.
familiar, Dave. We just went through
Yeah,
a similar. That's crazy, man. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Keep
And
going. Keep going.
and the stock market too. So you mentioned that earlier. So they had the stock market. So why didn't people would just buy stocks and protect themselves? Well, they did that in Weimar and Zimbabwe. But the problem is when you're in hyperinflation, your economy is crushed. I mean, there's no more economy at all. So every companies that are listed in those stock exchange, they just die. They can't. Well, and actually, the funny part is that in Germany, because of the money printing, they were able to create a lot of industrial properties and a lot of yeah, some rich people there would take the free money and just build industries, like, and pay people like nothing, because they were paying them with printed money, and when they had to pay back, well, their loans, well, the loan would not worth anything. So it was super great for them. So at some point in Weimar, there were some pressure from the industrial guys, say, no, I don't want the mark to get back to normal. I want it to stay that way, because I can like create more industries for free. So that's something that is like a bit like now. So the zombie company that can just keep that we keep alive just because there's cheap credit, and they don't like provide some real value to the economy that would make profit of if we had some sound money. They just live out of government subsidies or from free credit. So like 0%, 0% or near 0% loans. So it was happening at and some people, even in the like MMT, yeah, theory, like the MMT guy people, they would argue that it was great for Germany. They created a lot of industrial zone at the time. When you read that, you're like, what are you talking about? They destroyed the country. And so, yeah, maybe they did construct a few industrial zone, but we don't care. They just destroyed. The people were dying in the streets because they weren't eating enough. And at some point, I mean, the farmers would stop to sell their culture, what they would
And they wouldn't sell it for cash. Yeah.
yeah, because they wouldn't accept cash. So that's what happened. And the last thing is the monetary substitution. So during Weimar, France experienced a lot of inflation too. Um, in France they had the new franc in the 60s, I think, the new franc, because before that you had like 100 franc bills
Mm.
at the time, because they had a lot of inflation back in those days. So the bills had more zeros on it, and they created the new franc. I think in the 60s, and the franc were going like I think it was you needed 4 franc to make $1 after the revaluation.
Mhm.
So this inflation went down at that time, but they were not that much affected by it, because they could go to Germany, to Weimar, across the border, and enjoy the power of their currency, even if it was there was a lot of inflation for them too. So people were exchanging money. So the mark was undervalued, even if it had more inflation,
Right.
and the franc was overvalued, even if it had a lot of inflation.
Yeah, like everything is relative, right? The
Exactly.
relative strength is what matters.
That's what I wanted to express. It's just a matter of relativity, and it's just a matter of if in every hyperinflation the money is undervalued. As weird as it sounds, it has to be undervalued for hyperinflation to occur. Yeah, so that's it.
Quite a story there. There's some things I want to pull on here. I wrote a couple things down where you were explaining that. Fantastic explanation from you.
Thank you.
You mentioned the split between what you called the productive economy in terms of establishing a tax base and funding government operations, and funding government operations.
Yeah.
I don't know where we are here in Canada, or maybe in the modern world. We don't have to talk about Canada yet, but we should at some point. What is the meaningful split that we should be looking for? Is it 20% printed money and 80% taxes? I mean, we're way under that. I think I said on the show last year that the United States tax base from actual productive economic activity is closer to paying for the sewer grates than it is to funding the entire government. And that's probably not far from the truth, but I'm curious, have you given that any thought? Like in your research, have you come across what is the split that you just can't come back from?
Great question. I don't think I've stumbled upon this number, but one number I can give you is the the difference we talked about with the money substitution, the difference between let's say France and Weimar back in the days. The difference, the guy called Bernals calculated the difference, and he said that the difference must be like something like 20%. So like the overvalue or the undervalue, the difference between the two currency. So I guess that the franc must be overvalued by 20% or 10%, and the mark by 10%, something like that, and it could create a feedback loop, I guess, and put the less the lesser, well, the value, the money that is undervalued in hyperinflation. So that's a number I know about. But what part of the government need to how many percentage of the budget the government needs to print to go in hyperinflation? I don't think there's a real number that you need to reach. I think it's just that as if you keep, let's say you start by printing 10% of the money, okay, let's say that, and the next year you need 20 because you have less revenue, and you have more expenses because the money is worth less, and the next year it's 30, and on and on and on.
Naturally, yeah.
That's a loop. So I guess that's how it starts. It's that you have a deficit that you cannot fix, and you don't do any measure to correct it. So, well, I can tell you something how to get out of hyperinflation. It's really simple. There's two choices: you dollarize, or you create a new currency, and people just need to believe in it. That's it. So you can create a new currency that is sound money, like I don't know, really backed by gold for real, and it could fail because the people who are going to use the money don't trust you, and it will fail. And you can have a fake money, a fake new money that is not backed by anything. If the people of the country believe in it, it will work. They will buy in on the money and say, yeah, there's no more inflation, because there's anticipation in inflation, right? There's a psychological aspect there. One story for that. In Zimbabwe, a guy who was selling shoes, he would at one point he would stop, his supplier would stop to accept credit. I mean, normally he would pay 30 days later,
Right,
so
right,
you buy
yeah.
them and pay. So at one point, they would not accept to be paid 30 days later, because in 30 days, the money was not worth anything. So to compensate, it would say, yeah, you can pay us in 30 days, but you will pay that price. So instead of 4 million for a pair, 4 million Zimbabwean dollar for a pair of shoe, it would be 80 million for the pair of shoe. So what happened there is that the guy would sell right now the shoes for 80 million, well, maybe 100 million, because he will pay 80 millions to his supplier in 30 days. So they will buy it right now for 100 million. So you accelerate the inflation because you're selling right now the price of in 30 days, just because of the supplier releasing shit. So there's it's not.
So that's a great point. That's a really good point.
The inflation didn't even happen. It's just anticipation of it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Actually, I hadn't, again, like I said to you earlier, when you're in this kind of environment, you think about this stuff often, but it's not so often that it's broken down for you so succinctly. This idea that anticipating inflation will cause inflation at an elevated clip is serious. Now, I want to ask you about the Eurozone. The Eurozone is an interesting kind of experiment, right? You have a number of countries, varying economic success, varying economic strength, varying, I would say economic capacity, thanks to commodities, thanks to sitting governments, thanks to whatever, right? The Eurozone is in a weird spot because they are sort of competing with the dollar implicitly, explicitly, some combination of the two, to be this this leading currency on the planet, while at the same time they rely on the dollar to stabilize their economy thanks to trade. And you have these like I said, this multitude of countries that needs different levels of support in terms of printing, and there's no state level government to do it. What do you make of that? Is
Yeah,
there like anything, what comes to your mind when you think
I'm
about the
so glad
euro?
you bring that up. That's super interesting because for France, okay. So earlier we talked about if hyperinflation could happen in Canada, and explained you why it could, why it would not be as Zimbabwe or Weimar right now, because it's different. We're not financing the whole budget with printing money and all that. But there's also that we have monetary sovereignty. We owe the money to ourselves. So France doesn't have this power. When they have a deficit, they borrow the money to foreign powers.
Mhm.
So they owe the money to someone else. That's one other thing that those countries that have hyperinflation have in common, is that their debt are in dollars, like
Hmm.
US dollars. Because when you get to hyperinflation, well, when you try to finance your budget and you're not doing well, people won't accept your money. So if you want to import, you need you in foreign dollars, you need foreign money. So you're going to get your debt in. You have an external debt, and in Canada we don't have that. We don't have those external debt. We print our own money and we can buy things in the world. Well, we have a nice exchange balance, so we
Sure. Yeah.
sell a lot and we buy a lot, but it balance. So we're fine with that, and we can print our own money. So that's another thing that can help us with hyperinflation. So back to euro. Europe is that's so weird, I guess. I mean, I don't really understand why they did that back in those days. I guess it was like to make the whole continent more economically efficient to trade with each other. I guess it makes sense. But the problem is now is that you have Germany that should have a sounder money, like a harder currency, and France that should have a softer money because they're socialists. So
Mhm.
they wanna like pay the
Yeah, there's more risk in that currency. There's more risk in that currency for
yeah,
sure.
but I mean they need to print more.
Yeah.
If they would have, it's not red at that point, it's not even a risk thing, because they won't borrow money, they will print it themselves.
Mm.
So they need a soft money that it is elastic, so they can finance all their socialist dreams. And that's fine for them. They will have a lot of inflation, that's it. So they want to pay it's what when you're old, you call that, sorry,
Pensions.
pensions. They don't capitalize their pensions. Can you believe that? Their pensions are not capitalized. Here in Canada, our pensions are capitalized. I mean, we have some money somewhere in the government, and they pay pensions with that money. So, and yeah, you receive a form every year, and well, not every year, but you have the amount you contributed
Yeah,
and
and
all
they
that.
they CPP issues a report on the investment strategy and the
Exactly.
structures. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's capitalized. In France, it's not capitalized. It's just the government that pay for it. It's so people were paying pensions with the money, send money to government. They're not sending the money to have it back someday. They're sending the money to pay the people that have
Right
their
now.
right now. So it's a Ponzi. It's literally a Ponzi. So, but I don't care. They can do that if they want, but they need soft money, like an elastic money, to do that, and they will have inflation. And on the other side, you have Germany that is more productive and could have a sounder money, a harder money, and so the softness or the hardness of money should fit your productivity. So it will help those two countries to have money that fit more uh, their needs. So they would have less inflation in Germany for sure. So now it's just a melting pot of a hard money that is too hard for France and a money that is too soft for Germany. So that's a big mess, in my opinion.
It's such a fascinating topic. Are you familiar with the dollar milkshake theory?
No.
So dollar milkshake is, I think it's from Brent Johnson or Brett Johnson, this American guy. And I think it's in the same vein as some of the stuff you're saying, Dave, but you tell me. This idea that as currencies sort of become difficult, they become unpalatable to invest with or in. So not only are you not holding euros, you're not investing in European countries anymore because the situation is not as sound as it should be, right? Like you mentioned, the pension is a good example. And so the risk of those currencies in those countries faltering has to be expressed somehow. But since it can't be expressed in those currencies, what you actually see is money from, Canadian markets, European markets, African markets, Asian markets, Indian markets, whatever, all going into the US. And so the value of the US dollar spikes as sort of the last gasp of the modern economic system.
Yes.
Is that possible in your view?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's always the better money that wins. So that's where we're bullish on Bitcoin, right? Right now, we know how Bitcoin is a good money. It's a hard money, and during the old history, it's always people turns to the best money they can have. And right, I think right now, even if the government are really, the U.S. government is really unresponsible and having large deficit, the U.S. dollar is still the reserve currency. So I guess it's safer to, well, the whole economic system is based on treasuries, U.S. treasuries,
Yeah.
and I know that countries right now are dumping them and they're not buying them as they were in the past, because I mean the U.S. government did did get some countries out of the SWIFT.
It was the unthinkable. Yeah.
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 So I guess that some countries said, "Oh my God, I don't think it's the reserve currency anymore." So there's cracks in this system, but it's still, well. I mean, it's you saw when we saw some problems on the horizon a few months back. The gold went down. I think Bitcoin went down, and the U.S. dollar went up a bit.
Yep.
And that's when people say, "Well, I think the sorry the asset we use when there's problem."
Yeah.
different-
The safe,
the
like the
safe
safety.
haven, the
Yeah.
safe haven.
Yeah.
It was the U.S. dollar at that point for some, I don't know, macro reason, and now we see the gold is going up and Bitcoin had a rally, and now I don't know what's, well, I guess it's what happened today. I guess that it's its price, but yeah. So the dollar is still it's still a tool that is utility, because it's the world reserve currency. So yeah, of course, people want to invest that believe in fiat system will prefer US dollar to Canadian dollar to euro, of course, because it's not that is a better system, but it's a system that is still
It's the cleanest dirty shirt, we say.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I guess that's the dollar will still be king for I guess a long time, until we really have serious problem, and then I guess Bitcoin could be like a lifeboat or something, that it will not be correlated to those market that depends. So yeah, one point, Joey, right here.
Mhm.
You know how United States can experience hyperinflation?
Yeah.
Prof. St-Onge mentioned that once on Twitter. Is that, as we mentioned, if the dollar lose is world reserve currency status, imagine that all the U.S. dollar come back, all the U.S. dollar that exist come back to the USA. Because I mean, if the U.S. dollar is not the world reserve currency, and you don't trade oil with it, you don't do trade deals with it
Yeah. It'll be on
anymore,
short again. Yeah.
you all the dollars will go back to the United States, because it's the only place that it's useful. It's the only place that you can pay your taxes with it. So all the dollars in the world will go back to the United States. What happened if that happens? Well, maybe not hyperinflation, but very high inflation at least, because there will be, let's say, 3 times too much money. 3 times just a number I invented, but not as we talk, the volume of US dollar is okay for the whole world
It's being
economy.
used for the whole system, right?
Exactly. So if you shrink that just to the economy of the United States, well, there's going to be way too much
It's a
dollar.
bit much. The cup might be a little over full.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's why you're going to get inflation for sure.
So I want to ask you a couple more questions, then we'll get into the Canadian situation.
Okay.
This is more of a comment than a question, but as you're talking here, I'm kind of thinking about some of the things that we look at for the show when we're kind of deciding, are we going to raise a red flag tonight about X data point or Y data point? When we talk about like this idea that people realize that cash is not the thing they can be in anymore, there's oftentimes these economic reports from governments and from banks and from sort of independent investors or hedge funds or you name it about the consumer savings rate. And it's how much cash does the consumer have? In times of prosperity, what you see is that savings rate tick up a little bit. People have a little more cash because they're flush with money, job is good, bills are, everything is kind of going along. And in times of decline, it ticks down a little bit. That's kind of been the case for a long time. But recently, what you've seen actually is just the general kind of ticking down, both for people in the upper tier of earners, the middle tier of earners, lower tier of earners. So all the same. And it makes me wonder if what you're seeing there is not actually people spending their cash on food, but rather realizing that they have to put their cash somewhere to watch it grow. And as you mentioned there, sort of in the same vein as the guy who buys the shoes for next month's price, understanding that if they take debt now in a year, the debt will be more manageable just because of dollar debasement. That's a comment. I don't, you don't have to respond to that, but I was thinking about that. What I do want to talk about though is the pensions here. They are capitalized at some level. I don't know exactly what level, but thanks to unfettered immigration, thanks to our currency maybe not producing in terms of its monetary purpose at the level that it should. And I think also, Dave, probably if I had to, put a third point on that, I would also say that Canada is no longer a productive economy. Yep. And that risk is going to be expressed in currency value at some point in the future.
Yes. Are
pensions really as safe and as well capitalized as the CPP wants me to believe? Or is there really a greater risk for people, you and I are around the same age, for people in our age group, when I turn 65 in 20 years or whatever it is, that money is just not going to be as valuable as it would have been if I was able to invest it in something today.
You're going to get what you're owed nominally, for sure. There's no problem with that. But what that money is going to be worth. So I was talking to a friend this weekend, and he's a teacher, and his pension will be $86,000 per year.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that basically he's a millionaire if he reach 80 years old. Okay. So if he reach 80 years old, his pension would have like worth $1 million more, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So what I made him realize is like, do you realize that like any teacher in Quebec is a millionaire? So how easy it is to be a millionaire? Any boomer that bought a house at the right time is a millionaire. Yep. So now everyone is a millionaire. So I guess it doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything now to be a millionaire. So that's the first point. And the second point is that so his $86,000 in he's gonna be retiring in, I don't know, 10 years maybe. So in 10 years he get his retirement. So $86,000 will be a lot because he won't have all those expenses.
Sure, the mortgage, etc. Yeah,
exactly. So, but in 30 years when he's going to be, in 30 years when he's going to be 80, even with a 2% inflation target, that would be worth, I don't know, $50,000 current dollar. So $86,000 seems a lot right now, but in 30 years it will not be worth. In normal inflation, that don't count hyperinflation or high inflation or anything, just normal inflation, the target, it will be worth a lot less. So I made him realize that, yeah, it sounds like a lot, but actually it's half. He told me that it's half linked to the inflation. So
see, that's a bullshit stat though, because unless you're just eating fucking Cheerios,
that's like that's what I said earlier. CPI is a number that they fudge, they play with it. So yeah, of course. But yeah, so it's a bit. It will be his retirement will be adjusted a little bit, but it won't fix everything. So it is capitalized. The money is there, but we don't have any. As if we continue to print money as we do, it's not gonna be worth it at the end, because we're gonna have all devalued the money we saved. So something that people don't realize is that if you don't print money, if you have a fixed monetary system, you're going to have deflation.
Yeah.
Anytime you have productivity gain, you're going to have deflation. And so economists will say, oh my God, deflation, everyone's going to die. It's going to be the 30s again. We're going to have a big crisis, economic crisis. Everybody's going to die. But there's two concepts here. There's a growth inflation, growth deflation, and the fiat deflation. So fiat deflation is what happened in the 30s. It's a credit bubble that burst, and then you have deflation. It's normal, and it's a crisis, but it's because of the credit bubble. Okay, it's not because of deflation. It's the problem is the credit bubble, not deflation. Deflation is the consequence of it. But when you have growth deflation, it's basically because you have a fixed amount of money, let's say gold. It happened in the 19th century. The whole 19th century in the United States, besides of the Civil War, there were growth deflation. There was economic growth, and the price were going down. If you say that to any Canadian economist, it will say it's not possible.
Which is unbelievable, because these people all buy TVs, they all buy computers. They can see that production is becoming cheaper and cheaper. The quality is increasing every year, every 6 months, whatever, and they can't connect the dots.
It should be like that for everything. It should be like that for everything. So they're not hiding it. They don't want central banks have a target of 2%, but it's not. People sometimes think that they try to control the inflation not going up, but no, that's not that. They try to control the inflation going down. That's the thing. If people that are listening right now have to learn something from this podcast, is that central bank are not controlling the inflation. They're not trying to stop inflation going up. They're trying to stop inflation going down. That's why they print money. Because if they don't print money, the price of everything is going to go down, because we have economic growth. So you have more people, more production for the same amount of money. It's mathematics. The price are going to go down. So their argument is that, well, people will not want to have their salary go down. Yeah, I know that's one of the problem that all those guys back in those days were talking about. That the real problem here is that these economists will say, yeah, well, people won't and that's actually one of the reasons there was child labor in the 19th century. That's one of the reasons, because the price were going down, and it was deflation, and the people who were paying the workers were like, well, we have to the opposite of pay raise. What's that?
Take a pay cut.
Pay cuts. Sorry, yeah. We have to get you pay cuts, and people had no, so they were hiring children literally because to have the labor, the labor worth less. So that's one of the argument that people don't want deflation, because they, well, we're gonna have to hire children. Well, actually, we are hiring children right now in Tim Hortons because there's nobody that want to work. So anyway,
and by the way, you may not be hiring children here, but in Myanmar, where your Nike shirt is made, it's a kid. It's a kid doing that. And these people are they're the absolute worst, man. They are the worst, because they know that what they're saying is plain old not true. And they have to fudge the numbers and fudge the data and fudge the theory, because of what? They want the GDP to look good, so that somebody can tweet out we're one of the best in the Who the fuck cares? Who the fuck cares? You can't afford anything. I'll be sure to warm my body when I can't afford heating, with the burning pages of Maclean's magazine proclaiming that I'm living in one of the best countries in the world. I can't wait. It sounds like a real treat.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, we think we're like rich countries, but we're kind of forgetting that what makes rich countries rich, it's productivity. And when we create value, it's not just something like, oh, now we're rich, we can pay for everything. No, it's every year we have to produce more and offer services and producing goods to have an economy. That's what make a rich country rich.
Yeah.
So so if we would just not mess with the monetary mass, price should go down. And according to a guy who wrote the book in defense of deflation, I don't have his name in right now, but anyway, a great guy that I've read some of his work, and that's why I learned about growth deflation and compared to fiat deflation. And what he said is we may not have to even to uh, cut the salaries, because with higher productivity and technology advancement, maybe people can keep their salary, and we're gonna give more job to robots, AI,
Mhm.
and be more productive. So maybe we can just stay with the salary we have. And you know what? At the end of that, maybe I would prefer to accept pay cut and have more purchasing power with the money.
For sure.
That's just what we have to learn. If you get a pay cut of 10%, but your money, your salary and all your savings is worth 20% more, well, you're still winner, even if
100%.
you got a 10% take it. So it's just a learning thing. So it would make sense.
It's a bit of a mental game, and I know I said we go an hour. We might go a little longer here if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Canada
Yeah.
because I think a lot of Canadians now for the first time are really looking at their finances. They're looking at economic policy. They're looking at social policy. To your point, there's a lot of things that sound good on paper that if they were free would be fantastic. Things like healthcare, dental care, childcare. And what we're seeing now in Canada acutely, I think, for the first time, is that everything has a cost, explicit or hidden. And I look at the grocery store, like I said to you earlier. Unless you're eating Cheerios and granola bars for every meal, things are more expensive than just 3% a year, 5% a year, or even the 9 and 10% that we admitted to sort of in the back end of the pandemic. What we're actually seeing is stuff like ground beef doubling in price, milk doubling in price, eggs doubling in price, all while government does its best to protect the profits of the oligopolies that produce these things.
Hmm.
And so, this is I think a lead into a question that we have to tackle here. Is Canada heading toward a hyperinflationary event?
As long as we have demand for our products, our natural resources, our services, as long as there's country that are willing to buy our currency, to buy what we produced, I don't think we couldn't get to hyperinflation. We can still have medium inflation, high inflation. Well, not high inflation. High inflation is almost as bad as hyperinflation. It's when the monetary substitutions happens. So that's the key here. So as long as there's enough demand for our currency to prohibits well, to protect us from monetary substitution, we're good. We could have medium inflation, like, I don't know, 2 digits, like 15-20% inflation per
In your
year.
view, is that hyperinflation? I know it's
No,
not
yeah,
officially. We were talking before the show how there's
mhm,
like these, sort
yeah,
of ceremonial check boxes. 50% is the number everyone uses. Is
50% per month. Actually,
or 100% over 3 years. Is that
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the official definition, I think it's a stupid definition. It's 50% per month. It's 12,000% per year. 12,000% per year. It's stupid. High inflation happen. It's exact same process that hyperinflation, and it just happened when there's monetary substitution. So there's no real number, and there's another standard that is from an accountant, international accountant association, and they say that people stop. There's criteria, and people like stop using money for storing the value as a medium of exchange. The salary are indexed. Every key thing in the countries are indexed to inflation, and yeah. It, it, this definition, it's 100% in 3 years, so 24% per year. So we were close to
We
that, right?
were.
That's at
Mhm.
some point. So, but we still use our money as money, even if there's medium inflation. So for me, hyperinflation happens is there's no percentages. It's just when there's monetary substitution. And if I can conclude that subject with this, this is a bills from 1962, 1862. It's a Confederate dollar. Okay, so this money hyperinflate. It was for about 40% per month in I think it's 1962 or something like that, during the Civil War in the United States. But it's not on the list because it didn't reach hyperinflation. But there was, yeah. So the United States say, we didn't have hyperinflation. It's false. The colonials also, the continental dollar also hyperinflate. It reached 47% in 1 month, but it's not on the official list because it didn't reach 50 the 50% per month. But there was definitely monetary substitution. So for me, it's hyperinflation.
That's okay. So I want to just back up a little bit.
Yep.
This idea of like everything being indexed to inflation.
Yep.
That piques my interest because I think in Canada, the official number is like 26% of people work for the government. All those salaries are indexed to inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Then on top of that, there's probably another 25 or 30% and growing, the boomers who have a CPP or pension also indexed to inflation paid by the government. Then on top of that, you have welfare recipients, baby boomer recipients, social security recipients, disability recipients, all indexed to inflation. Dave, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, that's gotta be, I mean, are you waking up with cold sweats thinking about that number? Like, what is that's gotta be like, it's like 70% of the population has some percentage of their income coming from the government, printed, or, I mean, it could be funded by a tax base, but it ain't fully funded by a tax base, indexed to inflation. And it's just, it's infinite, unlimited. It's untouchable.
Joey, I saw that precisely in Quebec. So before what we experienced, all the tariffs, all the price for a driving permit, all the price of the government was like decided for each, I don't know, if every 3 years or every 5 years, they would say, oh, so do we need to charge more and stuff, and they would announce like, oh, it's gonna be a bit more expensive this year, and they would announce it, and we would pay a bit more. But during the term of the government we have here, they just indexed everything. Like the Hydro-Quebec price are indexed to inflation. So every 2 years, they had to go to the energy council or whatever and ask for a raise, and they would evaluate their cost and their profit and stuff. And they would say, oh, you need to make the price like 1% more this year. They would like an institution that would decide that. But now they just said, fuck that, we're going to just index that to inflation, and they capped it to 3%. Because
that's incredible.
Because when we had the 6% inflation, everybody was freaking out. It's like, we can't get so they were like, yeah, we're just cap it to 3%. So inflation maximum 3% for the. So what I mean is that they just remove all those decision by the government. They said, just, we're going to index everything. That's it. So
this is why, like, I worry about the wage price spiral thing, because, even if they massage CPI to the point where it's like, 3 or 4% and it's capped, like, I know in Ontario, the OMERS pension, the Ontario Municipal Employees pension, is capped at 6.5% per year. So they did lose on a year there, basically, right? Over the course of probably 21, I guess it would have been, or 22. So they lose in that year, but like eventually that pension will catch up, right? They may not do it in 1 year, but they will try and make up for it. And so if you only have 10% of your population indexed to inflation and inflation is running hot, you don't have that big a problem. But when 70% of your population is receiving government payments, transfer payments, salaries, or some combination of the two, you run that risk. So I know you said that Canada is not a candidate for hyperinflation, but is there a country that's in a worse, like a modern economy that's in a worse fiscal situation than what we're seeing in Canada?
Any country that doesn't have monetary sovereignty,
okay,
and that has his sovereign debt, his debt in external, that have an external debt that they owe money to in another currency that their own, are worse than Canada. That's what we have here. All our debts are in Canadian dollars. So when inflation comes, our debt go down. So
Mhm.
every time we have inflation, the value of our debt go down. So any country that has his debt in US dollars, they're fucked. If they have inflation, in their own currency is worth less, but their debt is worth more because it's valued in foreign currency. So that's one of the ingredients to have hyperinflation and be in a serious problem. So what we have here in Canada is not a it's just a risk of, I guess, we won't have a debt crisis because all we have to do is inflate our currency a little bit every year, and the weight of the debt will go down,
Mhm.
and we're gonna be okay. But we're gonna have we're gonna have take all the value of the saving the whole Canadian to save the debt crisis. So there's a price to pay, but it's not. It won't break. It's just bad. But for some countries, it can break because at some point they cannot pay the interest on the foreign debt they have to pay to foreign country. So that's a different problem. But we're not in a good situation, I guess, because we're printing too much money, but we're in a better situation than countries that have to. And you know why those countries are borrowing money is because they cannot buy anything from other countries with their own money because
Exactly.
yeah, so that's why they have to borrow money to import. So that's what happened in Zimbabwe. They were producing a lot of vegetables and food for their population and exporting. And when they seized all the farms from the white people to give them to the population, uh, the uh, the people that were taking back the farm didn't know how to run farms. So all this industry crashed, and they were not producing anything. So they were not exporting, having all the money from foreign countries, and they were not producing for their own needs. So they had to import wheat actually from everywhere to feed the people, and that's one of the ingredients that made them go to hyperinflation. They were not.
That's
Yeah.
that's a okay. You've been an outstanding guest. I want to ask you one more question, sort of half related to hyperinflation, inflation, all this stuff.
Yeah.
You've obviously done a lot of reading. I was reading some of the stuff you wrote today. I've watched a couple of your presentations, including the one you did in 23 and 24 at the conferences. What books or resources would you recommend for somebody in Bitcoin, or even not in Bitcoin, who wanted to learn more about this? I think it's going to impact a lot of people. And as we were talking about before the show, our friends, I think, our normie friends were saying, kind of don't understand that the failure of a currency is a continuum. There's not a single moment where things just suddenly are dire, but there's a number of signposts along the way. And I don't think there's anybody we've had on the show who's better equipped to give some resources to people who want to find out more so they kind of know what to look for or can talk about what they're seeing in a competent way. So, I mean, what have you read? What do you recommend people read
Yeah.
on the subject?
So what got me into that is the $100 trillion from Zimbabwe. I was at in 2018 something. All the big corners had those 100
Yeah.
trillion dollar bills, and I was really interested. It's the first time I saw a bill like that. So I found two books about Zimbabwe's, and I've read them back to back. And one is from a banker and a farming banker in Zimbabwe, and the second one is a CEO of a retail company in Zimbabwe. And both guys are telling their story of the hyperinflation. So those books, the first one is uh, Zimbabwe warm heart ugly faces, and the second one is the boiled egg index. So because the one of the great index in Zimbabwe was the price of a boiling eggs and six boiling eggs in the market. It was a great index of the hyperinflation. And there's also the book about Weimar. Um, it's called When Money Dies. That's a great book. But the When Money Dies is a bit. it's a great book, but it's a bit difficult to read. The two other books in Zimbabwe are very interesting because it's personal. Because the When Money Dies is a guy that read a lot about Weimar. He didn't leave it. It was not there. So he's telling a story. But the two other guys are telling their own story with with family pictures and their trip to South Africa to kill lions or stuff like that. And no, they were fishing. Actually, they don't kill lions. They were fishing in somewhere in South Africa, and yeah, great books, very interesting. So that's the two books I would recommend if anyone listening to this podcast want to dig deep in hyperinflation. How it feels, what happens. Just one example: one of the guy paid his house with a bill in his pocket. He paid his house like 300,000 Zimbabwean dollar,
Oh my
and
God.
3 years later, something like that, 3 years later, he had a $500,000 bill in his pocket. It was worth like 50 cents, and he could have paid his whole
That's a
mortgage.
nominal debt, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. It was nominal debt. So that's kind of examples I think you that what how could that happen? So it was really great. So, and that's how I can speak about hyperinflation, what happened, what it does, because I have all those stories in my head. It's not just numbers, or I've not just read some Wikipedia pages and stuff. I dig deep in those stories. So yeah, I recommend those two books. It you can read that at the beach and enjoy it. It's not a hard. Oh, and the other book I would recommend is Broken Money. Lynn Alden. That's the
Yeah.
best book about everything related to money and finance and economy. I really like this book. I don't think it really covers hyperinflation, but it does cover inflation, I guess. Well, money printing at least, and
Mhm.
there's a great history about the history of money, the difference between credit money, commodity money, all those origin theories. It's really. I don't know if you read it, Joey, but
I
you
haven't
have
yet.
you have to.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
I should do it. Dave, you've been a great guest. Tell people where they can find out more about you, see some of your presentations, some of your articles. The floor is all yours, buddy.
Yeah, you can add me all on Twitter. It's at David St-Onge. So yeah, St-Onge. It's Stonge. Some people here, I guess, St-Onge. It's funny, and French people cannot even write my name correctly. They always write Saint. Like my name is ST.
SAINT.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
my name is ST-1. So they always write SAENT. Well, that's weird. So when I go to France, all my tag names, all the my names on the sheets they give you at the
Yeah.
conference, it's always wrongly spelled. Anyway, yeah. So on Twitter, I have a website, Bitcoin Everything You Need to Know, where you can have information to if you're interested in getting my book. And I said earlier that it's for newbies, but some of Bitcoiners I know that are really into Bitcoin for many years read it, and they learned few things that we don't know everything. And in there I wrote on every subject. I stumbled upon when I was doing my research when I was a newbie, and I've got it all verified by great Bitcoiners at the time. So everything in there is true, but I could not even write this book right now. I'm somewhere else. Yeah, that's a cool thing. I've wrote it when I was kind of a newbie still, and I was thinking as a newbie, so I was able to explain what I learned, in my journey. But now I could not even write this book again because I'm somewhere else. I could write a book about the history of money, but not a book about Bitcoin. Yeah, I could not find the words to explain it to a newbie as I was back in those days. Yep.
That's outstanding. Thanks for listening, watching, everybody. Full house tonight, as always. And we'll see you next time here on CBP.